Good evening. Elvis Presley died today. He was 42. Apparently it was a heart attack. He was found at his home in Memphis, not breathing. His road manager tried to revive him. He failed. A hospital tried to revive him. It failed. His doctor pronounced him dead at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The end at an early age of one of the two most spectacular careers in the history of American entertainment.
For nearly 5 decades, Elvis Presley's tomb at Graceland stood untouched, sealed in silence, wrapped in mystery. But now, with official clearance and global attention, it's been opened. What they discovered inside wasn't just remains. It was personal, emotional, confounding. A letter, hidden artifacts, and the haunting confirmation of long-whispered secrets. Was the body really his? Or had the king pulled the greatest disappearing act in history? Experts weighed in, fans broke down, and suddenly, the story of Elvis Presley was no longer finished. The truth surfaced, but so did deeper questions, because some legends never truly rest. The legend buried beneath Graceland. For nearly 50 years, Graceland has been more than a mansion. It's been a sanctuary, a shrine, a holy ground for fans of Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. People from around the world travel to Memphis, Tennessee, just to see the gates, the gold records, and most importantly, the tomb. The marble-covered resting place of Elvis himself. But what if the tomb didn't hold what everyone believed? Ever since his funeral in 1977, questions have swirled around what was actually placed in that crypt. Some say Elvis's body never made it inside. Others believe something valuable or secret was buried with him. For decades, fans whispered and speculated, with theories growing louder every year. As one devoted visitor once said, "You don't come to Graceland just to remember Elvis. You come here hoping he'll reach out." So when news broke that officials had been granted legal permission to open the tomb, the world stopped and listened. The reason? Preservation and structural review, they said. But for believers in the myth, this was the moment of truth. Was the body still there? Was it ever there to begin with? The mystery that had fueled books, documentaries, and fan debates was finally about to face the light. As crowds gathered outside Graceland, waiting in silence or softly singing "Love Me Tender," one thing was clear. This was more than maintenance. This was history being disturbed. The gates opened not just to workers, but to a mystery half a century in the making. Whether for closure or curiosity, people wanted to know. They needed to know. What really lay inside the tomb of Elvis Presley? As the workers moved toward the sealed crypt, cameras rolling and guards nearby, people around the world leaned in. But before we open the tomb, we have to talk about why this moment meant so much. Because for decades, a question haunted fans and fed tabloids. What if Elvis never really died at all? Whispers of a hoax. Since 1977, the day the world was told Elvis Presley had died, there's been a shadow following the official story. A theory that's refused to die. That Elvis didn't pass away from a heart attack, but instead faked his death, vanished, hidden, gone underground. It sounds like a Hollywood script, but to many fans, it's something more. It's possible. The theory got traction quickly. One major detail: the name on his gravestone. Instead of Elvis Aaron Presley, it reads Elvis Aaron Presley. A typo? Or a clue? Conspiracy theorists called it a signature move. Then came the sightings. Elvis in a diner. Elvis working at an airport. Elvis buying books on numerology. These weren't just isolated incidents. They formed a pattern. Stories passed along like campfire tales. The more the public dug, the stranger things got. The casket at the funeral was reportedly heavy. Too heavy, some claimed, for one man. Rumors spread that a wax dummy might have been inside, kept cold with air conditioning to delay decay. And then there were the security cameras at Graceland, turned off just before Elvis was found unresponsive. It all fed a single idea. The king didn't die. He walked away. These theories lived in books, on television specials, and later across the internet. People claimed he entered witness protection. Others said he owed debts to dangerous people and had to disappear. While none of it was proven, the belief became bigger than fact. A man named Elvis Presley had died, but had the real Elvis gone somewhere else? Now, with the tomb finally opened, fans wondered, would this end the debate or spark something bigger? As the crowd outside Graceland held their breath and reporters stood ready, the moment finally came. Tomb sealed for 50 years, untouched, until now. No longer rumor, no more guessing. This was the moment we saw what was really inside. What came next shocked everyone, because even truth, after decades of silence, doesn't always bring peace. The day the tomb was unsealed. It happened on a clear morning, the kind Elvis might have called a blue suede day. Under tight security and the watchful eyes of family-appointed lawyers, state officials, and preservation experts, workers at Graceland approached the tomb. The excuse was simple: structural maintenance. But the reality was something far more historic. After 50 years of sealed silence, the crypt was about to be opened. News vans lined the street. Helicopters hovered. A small group of fans gathered outside the gates, some crying, some singing. One woman held a hand-painted sign that read, "We still believe, Elvis." The entire event was surreal. It felt like a funeral and a resurrection happening at the same time. As the marble slab was lifted with careful hands, everyone watching held their breath. Was the king still there? Inside, they found what appeared to be a preserved burial vault. Forensics experts were present, tasked with confirming identity and documenting everything found. Was it a body? Yes. But was it Elvis? That's when things got strange. Alongside the remains were personal artifacts, letters, photos, and even jewelry. Items believed lost or never before seen. And with them, a letter that would soon make headlines worldwide. The contents of the tomb were respectful, reverent, but also shocking. Some items hinted at emotional struggles. Others revealed heartfelt words to Priscilla, and even notes to Lisa Marie. But the biggest question remained. Did the forensic evidence match Elvis Presley, the man we've seen in every photo and heard in every song? Experts gave no immediate answer. As one investigator said, "We found what we expected, and some things we didn't." The vault was open. The truth, or something like it, had come out. But even with answers, more questions followed, especially for those closest to Elvis. Because what they found inside that tomb didn't just belong to a musician. It belonged to a man, a father, and a family, still healing from a loss that never quite felt real. Inside the crypt, the marble was finally moved, and the crypt unsealed. What lay inside wasn't just a body, it was a story. Elvis's coffin had remained untouched for nearly 5 decades. But when investigators opened it, they found far more than remains. They found artifacts, personal, emotional, and deeply revealing. This wasn't just a burial site, it was a time capsule. The body itself was still sealed in a secondary vault, protected from outside elements. Experts confirmed the presence of remains, but they weren't just looking to verify identity, they were looking for clues. What did time leave behind? According to initial reports, several sealed boxes were found at the foot of the coffin. Inside them, handwritten letters, photos, and what appeared to be unreleased song lyrics in Elvis's handwriting. One of the most moving discoveries was a letter addressed to Priscilla, apparently written in the final months of Elvis's life. "I'm tired, but I still love this world," it read. "And I love you, always." Another item, a small gold-trimmed Bible, was opened to a bookmarked passage on redemption. These weren't just artifacts. They were echoes of a man wrestling with legacy, loneliness, and faith. The items stirred emotion, but also suspicion. Why were these things buried? Why weren't they documented before? Some believe Elvis himself requested them be hidden, a private goodbye that wasn't meant for the public. Others suggest these were last-minute additions by family or staff, meant to give him peace. Regardless of their origin, the discoveries gave the world a new picture of Elvis. Not just a performer, but a man saying farewell, in his own words. The artifacts spoke volumes, but the silence from his family spoke louder. As the world reeled from what had just been found, fans turned their eyes to the people who knew Elvis best. How did the Presley family react to the tomb being opened? And what did they say, if anything, about what was discovered inside? Presley family responds. After news of the tomb's opening went public, the world waited for one voice to speak: the Presley family. Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's only child, had long been protective of her father's image and fiercely private about her own grief. Though she had passed just months before this event, her estate released a short but emotional statement. Elvis belonged to the world, but he was ours first. May this moment be met with respect. Other relatives were more conflicted. Some saw the opening as a violation. Others saw it as closure. One cousin, who had visited Graceland many times, told reporters, "We always wondered what was really in there. But part of me wishes we never knew." The family hadn't publicly supported the unsealing but didn't block it either. That silence said a lot. What surprised many fans was the discovery that some of the artifacts had been known to the family. In interviews, insiders admitted that a few of the letters and items had been added to the coffin during a private ceremony the public never knew about. "It was personal," one family friend said, "not meant to be found, just meant to be with him." That only deepened the mystery and the emotional weight. But the most powerful reaction came from fans, who flooded message boards and fan sites with thoughts. Some thanked the family for allowing the truth to come out. Others wished the tomb had remained closed. The Presley family walked a tightrope between privacy and public legacy, and now, whether they wanted to or not, they were part of a story even bigger than their own. While the family wrestled with emotions, scientists began to look at the facts. Was the man inside the tomb really Elvis Aaron Presley? The public had waited 50 years for an answer. Now, with forensics teams brought in, DNA samples in play, and bone analysis underway, the moment of truth was finally on the table. Forensic experts weigh in. Once the tomb was opened and the remains confirmed, the next step was the science. Was this really Elvis Presley? To put the rumors to rest, forensic experts from Tennessee and national agencies were brought in. Their task was simple but sensitive: match the body with existing records, photographs, and DNA evidence. After decades of speculation, facts were finally being tested. First came the physical analysis. The remains were consistent with a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, with dental and skeletal features matching Elvis's known medical records. The wear on the teeth matched previous dental charts. A broken pinky bone, once fractured in Elvis's youth, was still visible. As one forensic specialist stated, "This is as close to a perfect match as you can get without a time machine." Then came the DNA. Though no official statement was released at first, anonymous sources claimed the results were conclusive. The body inside the tomb was genetically matched to Presley's mother and daughter. "It's Elvis," said one investigator. No question. The science lines up with the legend. That finding shut down the most enduring theory of all, that the king had somehow escaped and lived in secret. But the science didn't erase all doubt. Some conspiracy theorists called the results staged or manipulated. They claimed the testing was handled by hand-picked officials and not open to independent review. The backlash wasn't surprising, but the facts spoke louder. After years of rumors, the official word was clear: Elvis never left the building. His body, his story, and his truth had been right there in Memphis all along. With science confirming the body, the story should have ended. But it didn't, because even with the truth unearthed, some couldn't let go of the legend. Theories still swirled, especially one of the most talked about of all, that the coffin buried at Graceland was never real, that it was empty, or worse, something else entirely. The empty coffin rumor. One of the most persistent and eerie rumors surrounding Elvis's death was that his coffin was never filled with his body. It sounds outrageous, but the theory has stayed alive for decades. Some say it was a decoy. Others believe a wax dummy was used instead. And now that the tomb has been opened, this old question was finally tested. Was the coffin ever really occupied? It all started with reports from Elvis's 1977 funeral. Several witnesses, including distant relatives and fans who viewed the body, claimed something felt off. He looked too smooth, like wax, one mourner said at the time. It didn't look like him, not fully. The coffin, too, was unusually heavy. Reports said it took 6 men struggling to lift it. Mortuary experts claimed the weight was abnormal for a single body, unless something else was inside. That theory led to wild speculation. Could a wax figure have been created and chilled with a cooling system built into the casket? Some claimed the body was moved at the last second, either to avoid grave robbers or because Elvis hadn't really died at all. It sounds like fiction, but now, after the tomb was opened, there was finally a chance to find out. What they found was definitive. The casket inside the tomb held human remains in alignment with documented burial records. Forensics confirmed the body had never been moved, and there was no evidence of wax, decoy materials, or a dummy. Yet for believers in the empty coffin theory, even hard proof didn't quiet their doubts. One theorist said, "Just because a body is there now doesn't mean it was always there." But while the mystery of the empty coffin seemed to settle, a new curiosity took its place. Found deep in the tomb, hidden beneath other items, was something small and sealed. A letter. A real, physical message. Written by Elvis himself. And what it said might be the most intimate, haunting discovery of them all. The hidden letter theory. Among the personal items uncovered inside the tomb, one stood out above the rest. Tucked beneath a bundle of old scarves and a photo of Lisa Marie was a small, sealed envelope. The name on the front? To be opened only when the world is ready. Inside was a handwritten note, believed to be from Elvis, and its contents were unforgettable. The letter was emotional and raw. In it, Elvis spoke openly about the pressures of fame, his deep spiritual doubts, and his fear that the world only loved the image, not the man. "Sometimes I feel like a ghost in my own life," he wrote. "I smile for cameras, but I feel empty inside. Maybe one day, people will understand." It wasn't just a farewell, it was a cry for connection. There was more. The letter hinted that Elvis feared being consumed by the persona he had created. He talked about possibly stepping away from the spotlight, not dying, just disappearing. While he didn't say he planned to fake his death, the wording raised eyebrows. "If I ever vanish, it's not because I'm gone. It's because I want to be real again." That single sentence reignited decades-old speculation. Handwriting analysts confirmed the letter matched known samples of Elvis's writing. The ink, paper type, and seal were all consistent with materials from the 1970s. In other words, it was authentic, and that made its contents even more chilling. Was it a warning? A confession? Or simply the final words of a man who felt overwhelmed by his own legend? For fans, it was a gut punch. For skeptics, it was fuel. And for Elvis's legacy, it became yet another piece of a puzzle that may never fully come together. The king may have died in 1977, but his voice, through that letter, was speaking directly to us in 2025. With every new discovery, one truth became harder to ignore. Elvis's life had become bigger than his death. Fans couldn't let him go, not just because of the music, but because of the mystery. To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning, to why people were never ready to say goodbye in the first place. A life bigger than death. Even in death, Elvis Presley remains larger than life. That's part of why people never stopped asking questions. Because Elvis wasn't just a singer. He was a symbol of rebellion, of freedom, of youth that never dies. For millions, losing Elvis in 1977 didn't feel like losing a celebrity. It felt like losing a part of themselves. And that grief didn't fade. It transformed into obsession. It's not hard to see why. Elvis's career wasn't just successful, it was historic. He broke racial barriers with his music. He challenged social norms with his moves. He redefined how a performer could act on stage. But more than that, he was personal. Everyone had an Elvis song. Everyone remembered where they were when they first saw him perform. He wasn't just in the charts, he was in people's lives. That kind of impact doesn't end with a funeral. It lingers. And when someone that iconic dies so young, with so many questions left unanswered, it's natural for myths to grow. Was he really gone? Could someone that alive simply vanish? One fan said it best. Elvis was never just a man, he was a story. And stories don't die, they evolve. That's why the tomb opening became more than a news event. It became a cultural reckoning. People weren't just looking for bones or letters. They were looking for closure, or maybe, just maybe, for permission to keep believing. To believe that somewhere out there, the king still lives. Not because it's true, but because, deep down, we hope it might be. By now, the tomb had been opened, the body confirmed, the letter read. But behind the headlines, one man's name kept coming up. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, protector, and possibly his greatest manipulator. What did Parker know? And did he help shape the mystery long before the tomb was ever sealed? The role of Colonel Tom Parker. Behind every great performer is someone pulling the strings. For Elvis, that someone was Colonel Tom Parker, a man who both made and, some believe, broke him. Parker wasn't just Elvis's manager, he was a gatekeeper, a deal maker, and sometimes a wall between Elvis and the world. And when it comes to the mysteries surrounding Elvis's death and burial, Parker's name keeps coming up. Parker controlled nearly every aspect of Elvis's career, his music, his movies, even his interviews. He negotiated record-breaking deals, but kept Elvis on a tight leash. He was the most brilliant con man in show business, said one music historian. When Elvis died, Parker was still involved in key decisions, including what happened at the funeral and what was said publicly. Many wonder, what did he know? Some theorists believe Parker had a hand in shaping the post-death mythology, that he leaned into the rumors, fed the public just enough confusion to keep Elvis's name and revenue alive. There are even claims that Parker arranged the funeral details to be vague or misleading. One former employee alleged, Parker wanted the legend to live longer than the man. Whether or not Parker fueled the mystery intentionally, his silence afterward spoke volumes. He rarely addressed Elvis's death directly, and in interviews, he'd shift focus back to Elvis's accomplishments rather than the circumstances of his passing. It wasn't deception, it was distraction. And in doing so, he helped build something even more powerful than Elvis the man, Elvis the myth. With Parker's shadow lingering over Elvis's final days, another question began to resurface. One so strange, so deeply personal, it bordered on the supernatural. What if the man buried at Graceland wasn't Elvis, but someone else entirely? And what if that someone was the brother Elvis never got to grow up with? The ghost of Jesse Garon. Elvis wasn't born alone. On January 8, 1935, his twin brother Jesse Garon Presley was delivered stillborn, just 35 minutes before Elvis. That loss shaped Elvis's entire life. He often said he felt like, a part of me is missing. But in the world of conspiracy and mystery, that tragic birth took on a much stranger twist. Some fans, and a few fringe theorists, believe Jesse didn't die that day, that he survived and was hidden away for secret reasons. More extreme versions suggest Jesse and Elvis later switched places. Others claim Elvis faked his death and assumed Jesse's name to escape fame. These theories are wild and often dismissed, but they reveal something deeper, the twin bond that haunted Elvis throughout his life. Elvis reportedly spoke to Jesse's grave as a child. He'd leave flowers and talk to him like he was still there. In interviews, he often referred to an invisible shadow that followed him. "It's like I'm two people," he once said. That line alone launched dozens of books exploring the psychological impact of losing a twin, and whether Elvis ever felt like Jesse was still with him. When the tomb was opened, some hoped for answers. Was anything buried in honor of Jesse? A shared message, a symbol, a photo. One item did raise eyebrows, a locket with two initials, E and J. Was it a tribute or something more? Experts believe it was likely sentimental. But for believers, it was one more thread in a story that never ends. As theories clashed with facts, one final rumor stood tall above the rest. The idea that Elvis's body was never at Graceland at all. That it had been quietly moved, years ago, to protect it, or to hide something. Could the truth be buried somewhere else entirely? Was Elvis moved in secret? The idea that Elvis's body was secretly relocated sounds like the stuff of spy novels. But this theory has persisted for decades. According to some insiders, Elvis was originally buried at Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, but just 2 months later, his body was reportedly moved to Graceland. The reason? Security concerns. But others think there was more to the story. At the time, Elvis's father, Vernon Presley, said the move was to keep the grave safe from vandals or obsessed fans. That made sense, but some accounts suggest the move was rushed, quiet, and handled at night. Eyewitnesses claimed the casket was different. Others said it wasn't a second burial. It was the first time the real body was interred. Adding to the mystery is a gap in official records. Some documents confirming the move were never made public. There were also reports that Elvis's original crypt at Forest Hill was sealed off completely. Why? Was it empty? Or still occupied? Some fans believe that Graceland's tomb is more symbolic than literal. A monument, rather than a final resting place. When the tomb was finally unsealed, these rumors were finally tested. The body was there. The casket was there. Forensics confirmed everything. But that didn't stop the believers. As one fan wrote online, even if he's buried there now, it doesn't mean he always was. The legend, once again, refused to rest. So here we are. After 50 years, the tomb has been opened. The body confirmed. The myths explored. But what did it all really mean? Did the world finally get closure? Or did the discoveries inside the tomb only deepen the mystery surrounding the man who became a movement? That the king is gone. When Elvis Presley died in 1977, the world lost a superstar. But what it gained was a mystery, one that never truly went away. For every song played and every candle lit at Graceland, there were also whispers, sightings, and stories. And now, after opening the tomb, we have some answers. But not all of them. Maybe we never will. Yes, the body was there. Yes, the DNA matched. And yes, some of the wildest theories were put to rest. But the personal letters, the family silence, the questions left behind, they all proved something else. That Elvis's story isn't just about death. It's about the way we remember people who felt larger than life. And maybe we don't want the mystery to end. Elvis himself seemed to know this. In that letter found in the tomb, he wrote, "A man doesn't stop being who he is just because he disappears." Maybe that's the legacy he wanted. Not a final note, but a continued echo. A mystery not meant to be solved, but to be felt. Through music, through memory, through myth. So was the tomb opening the end of the story? Or just a new chapter in the legend of Elvis Presley? One thing's for sure. The king may be gone, but the questions live on. And as long as they do, Elvis will never truly leave the building. So, after 50 years of silence, we finally looked inside the tomb of Elvis Presley. And what we found was more than bones and belongings. It was a window into a man's soul, his secrets, and the myth he left behind. For some, this was closure. For others, it was just the beginning of something even stranger. Whether you believe the story is over or just turning a new page, one thing is certain. Elvis lives on, in memory, in music, and in mystery. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and remember, the king may be gone, but the legend remains.